this. I said, I hate daylight savings time. I complain about it every time. It's still the same. And I'm just thrown off. I don't know. I just don't understand why it affects a person so much, but it sure affects me. I have trouble going to bed, and I'm getting up at the same time.
I like this is daylight savings right here. I like this time. I don't like the other.
I don't care. I don't care. Just stick to one. So I haven't checked. Is the sun straight up at noon right now?
No,
You don't
it's
know?
not.
It's
It would
not.
be,
Yeah, okay. Anyway. So, see? Think how many guys would die in a gunfight because it's all messed up right now. Proverbs 19:10. How do we get to gunfights in the book of Proverbs? Because of the sun. Anyway. Capture the class's attention and point it towards more important things, right? 19:10, is that where you're at?
that's what you said.
Okay. Well, that's where I had marked. So if anybody has something different, we'll take that into account and figure something out. All right, Proverbs 19:10. Luxury is not fitting for a fool, much less for a servant to rule over princes. What's luxury? Does anybody know what that is? Okay, worldly treasures. Okay. We maybe say easy street. Luxury is not fitting for a fool. And so what we've seen in a lot of verses talking about the difficulty that a fool brings upon himself. And oftentimes, who's that fool blame? Anybody else? Yeah, right. We talk about products of our environment. Who's a product of their environment? Aaron says he is. Okay. So oftentimes what we do is we use that and we use that to point the blame at somebody else, like our parents or our family, right? For putting us in that situation. But really, it's our choices. Once we become adults, we put ourselves in our own environment, right? Are we affected by our upbringing and our influences? Absolutely. But sometimes we have to change environment. So how we look at this, luxury is not fitting for a fool. And so the fool's not going to have an easy life. The things he's doing is going to make things difficult for him. And so, we had a good conversation with a couple fellows last week down in Bethany, and, their situation isn't pleasant. Whose choices brought them to that? Right? Think about that. It says, much less for a servant to rule over princes. And so, what we see is, I think this verse, what we're talking about is mindsets, right? What's your mindset? Is it fitting for a servant to rule over a prince? What makes a prince a prince? Status. Okay. Solomon, his father was a king. So we're talking about from one leader to the next, right? That's what this describes. Leader to the next. David's father was not a king, right? Who chose him? God, right? God chooses our leaders based upon what? Merit, what we need, right? Their abilities based upon what the people need, right? And so a prince oftentimes is one, and these are Proverbs, so we're talking about rules of thumb here. And so the mindset of a prince is oftentimes going to be the mindset of a leader, right? He's going to have leadership attributes, qualities. Solomon, how much did he learn from his father? I think a great deal, didn't he? And so he was raised, developed. We think about Moses. Moses, he had his physical parents, and then he had his Egyptian family, right? But his upbringing gave him the mindset to do what? To lead people. And so when you go back and you look at this, and we see examples in the Bible of a servant becoming a ruler over princes. Name some. Joseph is who I think of. Is that who you, Joseph is one, right? Okay. What caused him, and there was a little bit of discussion we could talk about, what made him go from a servant to a prince in a sense, right? Coat of many colors. What's that? His brother sold him into slavery. Sold him from being a servant of his father to be a servant of the Egyptians, right? Or those that bought him, took him into Egypt.
His actions got him.
Okay. His actions are actually affected by what? Mindset. And so some people say, well, I wish I was in charge. Change your mindset and become a prince, right? In a sense. Anyway, any discussions about this? Really, this may be section 7 when we talk about self-control. Because a person has to build and train themselves, develop themselves to be, elders. Are they born to be elders? What do they have to do? Yeah, they have to prepare themselves. It's a mindset, right? In preparation. All right, any quick comments? Verse 12. The discretion of a man makes him slow to anger, and his glory is to overtake a transgression. When we look at this, what are we talking about? We're talking about some leadership attributes, right? Leadership attributes in verse 10. We see the discretion of a man makes him slow to anger. Could this be applied to a person in leadership? Yeah, absolutely. A mindset of preparation, self-control, again, as we talked about here in section 7. And his glory is to overlook transgression. What does it mean to overlook transgression?
Doesn't that mean he needs to see it in a calmer state?
Okay. Part of it is controlling his senses, right? And so that's absolutely right. But you go back, and like Kathy said, discretion is a man makes him slow to anger. And his glory is to do what? Overlook our wrongdoing. Okay? Did God ever overlook wrongdoing? Remember David? What was the penalty for David and Bathsheba? They lost their son. Under the Old Testament law, it should have been death, right? Both are accurate statements, right? And so even God, he shows mercy would be a good word to put here, right? And sometimes if the wrong people are in power, what happens? What happened with Rehoboam? How did he come down on the nation?
By not dealing with
He came down hard. He wanted them to know he was in charge. So what we're talking about here is being careful and not having the mindset of strong-arming people. Verse 12 says, the king's wrath is like the roaring of a lion, but his favor is dew on the grass. And again, we might put these verses together, verses 10 through 13, in connection. The king's wrath, a roaring of a lion, but his favor is like the dew of the grass. And here, when we get into chapter 20, we're going to see a similar analogy here, talking about the king, or one in authority, like the roaring of a lion. But his... what's the difference between the roaring of a lion and the dew of the grass?
One's making a really loud noise and the other one is just helping.
Okay.
So what's new to the grass and makes it up?
If you were out in the fields and you experienced one versus the other, what would be your feeling? It would take the dew, right? Okay. And so the king's wrath is like a roaring of a lion. There's a lot that comes with that, isn't there? And so he has to have discretion, verse 11. Again, self-control is what we've talked about for these verses. Verse 13 says, foolish son is the ruin of his father, and the contentions of a wife are a continual dripping. This is talking about family life. And so we maybe section 18, our home life. We're talking about two aspects of the family, really three. What are the three aspects? The husband, the wife, the children. Okay? And so a foolish son is the ruin of his father. What's it mean to be the ruin of his father?
Definitely not bringing any pride or whatnot.
Okay. Maybe we can get Lauren to read verse 13 for us in our ESV.
A foolish son is ruin to his father, and a wife's quarreling is a continual dripping of rain.
Okay. And so in this verse, what we're talking about family struggles, right? And so the first part is the foolish son is going to bring pain to who? The family. Okay. And so, can we raise our children to the best of our ability and still suffer pain for their decisions? And let's be honest, have all of our children been foolish at one time or another, or will they? How about us? We probably were, right? And so, but then the second half, when we're talking about family struggles here, I think the definition for this is Chinese water torture. No, but that's what the contentions of a wife are like, a continual dripping. And so that is when you drip water on somebody to torture them, it's a torture technique, right? And so it's interesting to me that Solomon wrote this, not quite 2,500 years ago. No, just over 2,500 years ago. And we have today, when we talk about Chinese water torture, we say that is a terrible thing, right? And so what does Solomon say a contentious wife is like? Think about that, right? What's a contentious wife? What's the word you read? What is it? Quarreling, right? One that just likes to fight.
Nagging constantly.
Yeah. Just wants to argue about things. Anyway.
There's no such thing.
Yeah. And as we talk about these, does it apply both ways? What are we talking about? We're talking about family struggles, aren't we? Family struggles. And so the difficulty. And so when you look at verse 13 and compare it to when we get to the end of the book, we look at the virtuous woman. Will we see any similarities there? No, opposites, right? We won't see that. This isn't the attribute. Okay. So we talk about family life here, home life, section 18. Verse 14 says, houses and riches are inheritance from fathers, but a prudent wife is from the Lord. And so here in 13, we talk about one type of wife. And you read about the wife of verse 13, and it says, maybe I don't want a wife by verse 14. But what does Solomon say? A wife is from who? Okay, a blessing. So, the first part of verse 14, houses and riches are inheritance from father. What's he talking about here? Physical blessings, right? But a good wife is from what? A blessing from God, right? A good spouse. And so, what we realize here is there are some blessings that are far more valuable than others, right? Think about, you say, well, I could get a really big inheritance. Or I could have a wife that's like a drop of water that drips and drips and drips and drips. Or I could have a wife that's a blessing from God. And so, with Solomon writing to his son as a young man, you think there's maybe something about pointing his son in the right direction and looking for a woman? I think so. Okay. All right, verse 15 says, laziness casts one into a deep sleep, and an idle person will suffer hunger. What's the benefit of laziness?
Deep sleep?
Deep sleep.
No.
I don't know. I really don't think lazy people have deep sleep because you're not tired enough.
They haven't done anything.
Yeah, you haven't done anything, to have that deep sleep. So, Andy says laziness casts one into a deep sleep. That idea of deep sleep is talking about they're unaware, right? They don't know what's going on. Here, the world is passing them by, right? We have these apartments in town. That concerns me. Some of the people that are able to live there, and it can be a blessing for some people, but it's a curse to others. Why?
Because they're lazy. That's why they're there.
It can be. You're right. Some of can be that way. And so an idle person will suffer hunger. Well, is there any satisfaction, fulfillment? No, there's not. Okay. And so when we look at this, we might put this under section 13, industry and laziness. Verse 16, it says, he who keeps the commandments keeps his soul, but he who is careless in his ways will die. And so the soul here is representative of life. And so he who keeps the commandment keeps what? Life, right? Is there eternal life and eternal death? Yeah. And so when we look at this, are we talking about just physical blessings or spiritual? It's something that goes into, yeah, the blessings of the wise man, as we're talking about, flow into the next life, don't they? And the curses of a fool flow into the next life also. So we need to be careful about that.
Can you go to heaven if you're not wise?
No, I really don't believe so. You just can't do it. You can't do it.
Trick question.
Okay. I appreciate that. You must be related to your mother by trying to put the teacher on the spot, right? Anyway, so there's no blessing in that. Verse 17, he who has pity on the poor lends to the Lord, and he will pay back what he has given. And so, who gives to the rich? Not the poor. Is that a trick question or statement?
It's true.
God gives to everyone, doesn't he? Right? And so when we take care of his business, and I was planning on looking at James later on, James chapter 2, but we have responsibilities to care for those who are in need as Christians, don't we? Okay. And how much care are we accountable for? You ever thought about that? Have you ever thought about how much is too much? Sometimes you give somebody $20 and you say, maybe that was too much, right?
Well, if you can't afford $100 and you can afford 20, then you do what you can do.
You do what you can do, right? And so there's a difference between a handout and a hand up, right? Okay, we understand that. And so we have responsibility. And so a wise person is going to be wise with who they help, how they help, and when they help. But they're also going to find a way to help. And so that's important. And so, section 12, poverty and wealth, what do we realize? There's always going to be what? Rich people and poor people, right? When Jesus sent out his disciples in Luke 10, I think about that a lot, and I go read that fairly often, right? How did Jesus send his disciples out? We say, well, he sent them out 2 by 2. But what? Did they take their debit cards with them? You ever thought of what'd they take? Nothing, right? And God took care of them, right? And so, Jesus, was he known for his wealth? Wasn't known for his wealth. Was he taken care of? Do you think people gave him things? Had to have. Was that wrong? No. So because he had a job to do, right? His job was to be the savior of the world. And think if his contracting projects got in the way of that, what would happen to us, right? So you think about that.
Like muzzling the ox, he's out working, so maybe before you're worth something.
That's exactly right. It wasn't that he wasn't doing anything. He was poor. So maybe that's a good point Andy brought up. Because someone is poor doesn't mean they're lazy. Right? Think about that. Just because someone's poor doesn't mean they're lazy. So we need to help those folks out, Verse 18, it says, chasten your son while there's hope, and do not set your heart on his destruction. Chasten your son while there is hope? What's that mean? What do you mean by while there's hope? Okay. Okay. And so we look at this, and so what is discipline?
Correcting their mistakes.
Yeah, let's see, I think I got a quote here I put in, it's later on in my notes. Maybe now. What's the difference between discipline and its punishment?
Discipline's before and punishment's after?
I don't know. Here's what I was thinking about when we get to one of these later verses, and we're already going to cover it now as we think about those things.
Get consequences in the classroom instead of punishments.
Yeah.
One's for correcting, one's for.
And this is really a play on words, but I was thinking about this. And so maybe I'm inaccurate, but here's what I was thinking about. It's the same thing. We see these words interchangeable, right? But in our culture and the way people think about things, this is what I was thinking about. A child would say that I got punished, and a parent would say they got disciplined. You think about that? Okay. And so what that has to do with is our attitude and our perspective. And I know that these words can be used interchangeably, especially in the book of Proverbs. We see that. But I think in our culture today, the way we use these words is fitting for today. That sometimes we say, well, I got punished. No, you got disciplined. If we have the right attitude about it. And the attitude of a fool is always going to be, I got punished. Right? But a wise person says, hey, I was disciplined for my own good to help steer me in the right direction. Okay, I think all of us, when we were younger at home, we always got punished. And then when we became adults and did the same thing to our kids, we realized it was discipline. Right? So anyway, that's what I was thinking about. So
I don't think I've ever heard a kid say, I got corrected, unless it was like they were doing a speech and the teacher corrected a word or two.
Yeah.
They consider that being corrected.
Yeah.
But as far as their behavior, I don't think I've ever heard a kid say, I was corrected. As far as related to their behavior.
you mean as far as viewing it as a beneficial event?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I punished my kid, I told him it was punishment.
You don't?
I didn't say it was discipline.
Sorry. I guess my little quote, I was thinking about that, and I said, you know what, I think that's... And so you see this, a fool gets angry when someone chastens them because they're upset that they got in trouble. But their chastening was to direct them in the right direction for their own good benefit. So chastening your son while there's hope, or so there is hope, what do we have to do? Guide. What we're doing is guiding. You guide your children so that there's hope. Because there will become a time when there's what? There's no hope. So, do not set your heart on his what? If we don't discipline our children, we're going to be disappointed. That's what this verse is talking about, isn't it? And so correct your child before it's too late.
And we'll be judged for that one day.
Yep.
We set
That's the
back-
thing, I don't think, go ahead, say yours, and then I'll say what I got to say.
If we set back and we don't do anything to them, we just let them run with it, it's on us.
Yeah.
If we go through correct them and then they still don't pay attention, it's on them at that point.
So, I'm trying to get a chapter tonight, not that we have to, but we teach about we've got to worship God correctly, we don't steal, and all these sins that would keep us out of heaven. And so I know we've studied as a congregation, we've studied about the family, and so, but I don't know, for me, I understand, but then sometimes we forget is that our relationships, how we conduct ourselves with our parents and with our children and with our spouses and other relationships, it can either keep us out of heaven or help keep us on the right path. And maybe, I don't know if I'm describing this very well, but I don't know if we teach well enough that the way we interact with people, our relationship with them, if our relationship is incorrect, the way we behave, we may sacrifice our salvation.
Well, you think the fruit of the spirits is directed towards how your relationships should be, are using gentleness.
Yeah, but that's everybody else. No, I know exactly what you're exactly right. But what do most people think? When I get at home, those things don't.
Apply to me.
Yeah, they don't apply. Our kids, they fight all the time. That's like that may affect your salvation. So, I didn't mean to cut you off,
No,
but
no, that's,
I agree with that 100%, you know. And so, you know, where does it start? We talk about the Great Commission. Eric talked about that, you know, in our pathway to Christ. Is that what the theme is? The journey. Sorry, okay. And so, you know, but part of that is our relationships, right? Our journey to Christ. You know, he had good relationships with people. He had the right relationships with people. So, something to think about. Verse 19 says, "A man of great wrath will suffer punishment, for if you rescue him, he will do it again." And so, our anger can get the best of us, won't it? And what will happen if you rescue him? What will happen?
You could do it again.
Yeah, do it again, right?
Sometimes you have to figure it out yourself.
Yep,
It's
you
like
gotta figure it out.
beating your head.
That's right. That's right. And so again, we think about relationships. Sometimes the best relationship we can have with somebody is what? I'm here and you're there. And as long as you behave that way, I can't be a part of that. But if you change, I'm here, right? God's been that way with his people. And so we think about that. Maybe 16, or section 16, how we choose our friendships or what we do for our friends or those we consider friends. 20 says, "Listen to counsel, receive instruction, that you may be wise in your latter days." And so we're going to see some more verses that talk about or make similar statements. Listen to counsel, receive instruction, because wisdom is not something that shows up one day like a package on the porch, right? Wisdom is something that's developed. You know, Eric talked about the eldership, right? We had a good study about the eldership on Sunday nights. When does preparation for eldership begin? Yeah, the younger. And so listen to counsel, receive instruction, that you can be wise when you're older. That's what this is talking about. Wisdom comes with the intake of information. We're not talking about facts, right? We're talking about information. We've got to constantly be gathering information so we understand perspectives, we understand direction, and we can make decisions. Making informed decisions, right? That's what wisdom's about, making informed decisions. It's the best decision that can be made. So being a wise older person takes the preparation of a younger person, right? So if you want to be a wise old person, a lot of us, we know people, we say, I wish I could be like them someday. Start now. Got to start now. Okay, so wisdom, section 1 may be a good place to put that. 21, there are many plans in a man's heart, nevertheless the Lord's counsel, that will stand. Go to Psalm 33:11. Psalm 33:11. We're going to see a similar statement here made in this psalm. If you get there, go ahead and read it.
The counsel of the Lord stands forever, the plans of his heart to all generations.
Okay. So God, when God makes a decision, or when he says something's right or wrong, how long does it last? It's there, right? Set in stone. But there's many plans in man's heart. Does that make them right or wrong or indifferent? How many of us have ever changed plans? Justin, have you ever changed plans?
By the minute.
Yeah, he's got a project, and he's had some changes. Yeah, changes. When God makes a decision, it stays. Go to Isaiah 40 and verse 8. Isaiah 40 and verse 8.
The grass withers, the flowers fade, but the word of God stands forever.
Yeah. And so, when the Lord makes a statement about something, the Lord's counsel, when he says something, what does it do? It's there, right? You're not going to change it. You're not going to bend it. I was thinking about James 4, and James 4 and verse 14 is what we know as far as probably the verse that we're most familiar with here. And here it says, what is your life is even a vapor that appeareth for a little time, vanishes away. What was the context? Go back to verse 13. It says, come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go such and such a city and spend there a year, buy and sell and make a profit. Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow, for what is your life? It's even a vapor that appeareth for a little time, then it vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. Right? Why? Because we can make plans, have ideas, have thoughts, but God's the one that's ultimately in control, and his doesn't change. 22 says, what is desired in a man is kindness, and a poor man is better than a liar. And what we're talking about here in this verse is what? The blessings associated with integrity, right? A wise man is going to be a man of integrity. And so, what is desired in a man is kindness. What did we just talk about the poor? If we help the poor, what is that? Is that an attribute of kindness? It is, an outpouring of kindness. And so a poor man is better than a liar. We're talking about integrity, right? Whether you're rich or whether you're poor, you can still be an individual of what? Integrity, okay? Verse 23, it says, the fear of the Lord leads to life, and he who has it will abide in satisfaction. He will not be visited with evil. Lauren, can you read that in the ESV for us, please?
The fear of the Lord leads to life, and whoever has it rests satisfied. He will not be visited by harm.
Okay. Does that mean nothing bad will ever happen to us? No. Doesn't mean nothing bad will ever happen to us. But when we respect God, what do we know the outcome will always be?
It'll always be all right.
Always be all right. You know, when Stephen was being stoned to death, what did he say? What was his statement? Forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing, right? I don't think I can make that statement in that situation. But Stephen could. But where was he abiding?
With God.
Okay. He's abiding with God. And so he had fear for God. He knew everything would be all right. And he was visited with difficulty, but everything will be all right. All right, we'll pick up here next week. Any questions or comments? All right, thank you for your time.